Hello and welcome to Flaunt. Find your sparkle and create a life you love after infidelity or betrayal. Today, we are going to talk about something that I know is on so many of your minds. And that's the idea of, is my partner a narcissist? Oh my gosh, can we get through this? Is he a narcissist? And then going a little bit deeper, why is he a narcissist? Is this nature? Is this nurture? What can I expect? What can I do? How do I trust this? My guest today is Johanna Lynn, and she is a therapist and expert in epigenetics. And we're going to really unpack this whole thing for you. So, in case you're thinking, I don't know what epigenetics are, no worries. We got you covered. We are going to take care of everything. So, welcome to the show. I'm so glad you were with us today.
Oh, it's great to be here with you, Laura.
So let's start kind of from the beginning. What
Mhm.
is epigenetics? What does that even mean? And why does that matter?
Yeah. Oh, it matters so deeply. So, epigenetics is almost like the blueprint that we're born with. We now have an understanding that we are not just this individual self. We are really half our mom and half our dad. When you think about that biologically, chromosomally, we come in with many of their imprints. So, things that were unresolved in their life. That could include traumas, broken hearts, that could include perceptions and thoughts. We're sort of, we come through and we share an operating system with our parents. And so a lot of the times we think, well, this is just the way I love. This is just the way relationships go. And it's got a bit of a deeper meaning than that. And so, really, that's what relational epigenetics is all about. We're kind of born with a bit of a mold, and we get to choose if that serves us or if it's kind of holding us back and keeping us stuck in painful patterns.
Yeah, and I really want to go deeper
Mhm.
on that, what you just said. It
Yeah,
serves as a mold, but we get to choose.
that's right.
Because I can think of so many listeners being like, aha, my father-in-law is a total jerk. My mother-in-law is absolutely crazy. That means my partner, there's no hope. So let's talk about the mold versus the choice and how that might play out.
Oh, thank goodness there's a choice, you know? And it's more about how much of my choices, how much of my moods, how much of my life is really how I want it to be. Am I in reaction to, or am I in this place of choosing? And so, as a child, of course, we don't know we're in a mold. We don't know we have a choice. We don't know we can hold a boundary. And this is really a part of emotional maturing. This is really a part about growing into ourselves. And we get to decide, you know what? This repetitive stuck place we get into in our couple, I don't want to do that to this person. I don't want to feel like this. And so it does require us to look at where we've both come from and how we're playing it out together. And
Yeah.
so sometimes when we have that difficult in law, like you're talking about, let's let it open up more compassion for our partner. Oh, that's why this happens. Okay. Let's kind of unpack and understand where the starting point of a lot of this comes from.
Yeah. Okay,
Mhm.
so tactically speaking, so many of the listeners here, well, all of the listeners here have experienced infidelity in their marriage, in their relationship. And I know as somebody who has gone through it, one of the first reactions is to point the finger. You did this to me. I was perfect. I was the perfect wife. I was the perfect mom. I understand relationships. You are messed up. You're a narcissist. You're doing this. And it's really hard to kind of have some compassion, first of all, but then
Mhm.
second of all, to stop pointing the finger. I see this. You need to fix it. I see this. You need to fix this. Oh my gosh, this is you. You.
Mhm.
So, tactically speaking, do you have any advice or insight on how to own your part, maybe have clarity that you see what's going on with the other person,
Mhm.
but refrain from doing their therapy for them?
Oh, what a powerful question. You know, I don't know if you know this, Laura, but I walked this path as well. My first marriage ended due to infidelity. So I really understand where your listeners are coming from. And it is that knee jerk reaction, whether it's the heartbreak or the betrayal, to move into blame. And how could this happen? And how could you? It's almost like it's a part of the process of getting to the other side of such a experience.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I think your question is so, there's so much empowerment behind that question because if we stay stuck in blame, I had a very wise therapist tell me during this time that blame is the cheapest hit of power going. So if I'm stuck in blame, all my focus is out there onto them. And I don't have a lot of ability to move out of that very, very painful place.
Yeah.
So what I was able to get to, because I didn't want to repeat that same pain, was to really do the deeper work of, okay, what was my part in the relationship kind of fraying that this could even come in, that this could even happen? And I
Mhm.
have to be honest with you, a lot of what I learned is I was an overfunctioner. I was an overgiver. And so what I've learned in the work that I do today is that the overgiver ends up collapsing the relationship. And we do that out of a place of just wanting things to be good, just wanting to feel that closeness. And if our partner isn't able to meet us almost as quickly as we want to give more,
Yeah.
there's a restlessness inside the body, like a panic, that if I don't close that gap, the partner is going to move further and further away from me. But what we're looking at here is really the big picture over time, over weeks and months and years. If I'm always the giver, there's almost like an emotional indebtedness that the other person feels. And they'll move away from the relationship in various ways. One of the ways is infidelity.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I'm really thankful that you went there because it's honest and it's hard to hear. It's really hard to hear.
Yeah.
But that's what, and I hate this phrase, but that's what saved our relationship. My husband has a horribly awful traumatic background, ridiculously horrible. Did he have work to do? Absolutely. Was I perfect? Yes, I was so perfect until I started looking at that. My
Yeah.
perfection was like the savior complex that I do everything for everyone. And then that's when I started looking at my history. Women throughout history have been overgivers, overfunctioners, the mature ones, the ones who hold it all together.
Yeah.
And that did create a lot of bitterness and resentment also in my partner. And it wasn't until I looked at that, which I thought it was a strength,
Mm. Yes.
that's shifted everything. So let's talk a little bit about that ancestral piece on both sides. And when you look at like that, I thought I was doing the right thing. When is your ancestral history a benefit and when is it a burden?
Oh. Well, there's good and bad in all things, right? The longer I'm alive, the more I see that to be true. Good and bad in all things. And so, really, what we want to understand is what both sides bring to the relationship. And so, a lot of the times we can look at it as systems are attracted to systems. And so, why are you attracted to your spouse or any of your listeners, right? We could be out in a bunch of different single people and we have that click with that one person. Why is that? And over the years, I mean, I've been doing relationship work for almost 18 years and it just feels so clear now because it just keeps confirming itself
Yes.
that we're attracted to that person, I believe, to heal these deeper family imprints.
Yeah.
So that workaholic husband that you marry is about the distant father or the father that left when you were 8. We fall in love with the familiar, not necessarily what is healthy or what we would tell a girlfriend we're really looking for inside of our relationship. And
Mhm.
so uncovering our own family imprints lets us not just kind of fall into the subconscious hook of what's familiar.
Yeah.
We want to be able to fall and build what's healthy, fall in love with and build on what we really want more of
Yeah.
instead of just the default.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So all in, totally get this. Love the systems piece. Yes, we marry other people, like you said, to heal our family imprints. But here's a distinction I want to talk about. It's not you heal me. I didn't marry this man so he could heal my childhood wounds. He didn't marry me so I could heal his childhood wounds. And I think for a lot of people, there's kind of a disconnect there because I want to heal you. I want to be the
Mm,
one that totally heals you. And talk about how do you recognize that? And then how do you reclaim and own that healing for yourself instead of
yes.
putting it on your partner?
And I just wonder, as you say that, if the Hollywood rom-coms have steered us wrong, the
Yes.
Hollywood movies that think that that's the way it should go. And the truth is, if only we could heal another, it just doesn't work that way. And so, a really big part is, you know what? The best way that I can love you, sweetheart, is to work on myself. And the best way that you can love me is to work on yourself. And here we are in this kind of aligned path of commitment to self so that it can strengthen us. That if we move into mother or therapist inside of our marriage, we're just headed off a cliff. This is not the way anything's going to move well.
Yeah.
And I think when we try to change our partner, try to save, try to help, all with good intentions, it ends up really harming the relationship in the long run.
Yeah. I agree. I agree. And it's just, I love how you brought in the rom-coms because it is a narrative that we've all been fed that is not true. And it
Yeah.
is challenging to break away from that sometimes. But I know in my case and in the people that I work with, once you kind of take that first step is the scariest. And then it's like, oh, I do have control over me and I do feel better just showing up
Mm.
in life.
That's right.
Yeah.
You're reminding me of a client that I just worked with this past week, and she was kind of acting as her partner's health coach. He had some health
Mhm.
issues, and she kept, reminding and insisting and encouraging. And it was the main fork in the road for every argument. It was the spark to each and everything. And so when I shared with her, you don't need to be his health coach. And I understand your desire to want to help him with these changes because you want him to be around to live a healthy life with you. But
Mhm.
this has got to come from inside of him. And a lot of the times, your helpful reminders end up feeling like he's shamed or he's back in that little boy place. And the husband's on the call, like, yes, exactly. Thank you.
That's how I feel.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, so for some of the things like health or reminders or take out the trash and more like the life stuff, it can be irritating, that's for sure. It can put somebody back into like that. My husband used to say, I feel like I'm in the principal's office. And it
Oh.
was like, I don't want to be your principal. Thank you
Mm,
for that clarification because
yeah.
that's not where I want to be. For sometimes those smaller things, I feel like it can be more habitual. Okay, I just need to modify my language. I just need to let it go. This show, I really want to dive into some of the narcissistic patterns and behaviors. Those are some bigger things.
Mhm.
For those bigger things, I feel like it's harder to let go of sometimes.
You're so right. Because doesn't it end up feeling like I'm constantly in a compromise of self? If I
Yeah.
let this go, if I don't bring this up, I'm constantly on the kind of bottom rung here of the balance inside the relationship.
Yeah.
And so I think the narcissism is such an important topic because what do we do in a situation where it feels like nothing's changing? No matter how many times we bring it up, my spouse feels so
Mhm.
self orientated that I'm last on the list. Yeah. And so for me, I always want to go to where does that come from? How do we understand it? How do we resolve it? And so anytime I work with that inside my practice, I look at what stands behind the narcissist. And I got to tell you, Laura, every single time
Mhm.
we've got parents that were either workaholics, alcoholics, not present, quick to anger. There's this piece where the narcissist is leaning into the spouse or the colleagues or the friends, whoever they can kind of get what they need
Yeah.
because they're empty from behind. They didn't get enough of what every child needs to thrive, to feel sort of rooted in self. So they
Yeah.
tend to kind of lean into everybody that's close to them. That doesn't mean if you love a narcissist that you can let that continue to happen. But at least there's a different understanding of why it's there. Maybe more importance around why that person needs to do their own inner work, because nothing you remind or share is going to change this deeper behavior.
Yeah. So,
Mhm.
million dollar question and topic here. So, if they just didn't get enough in childhood, can't I just fill them up? So, can't I just lean in for like, I'll commit to a year and I'll give them everything and then they'll be filled up and then they'll just be healed? Why can't I just do that?
Yeah, I hear you. So I'm going to use this cup as an example. So let's say this is the narcissistic partner. We want to imagine we've got a bottom, like an empty hole inside this glass. So you're pouring everything in, the love, the care, the attunement, and it's just going right through. So it's really up to the narcissist to heal their container so that they can receive, so that there is a willingness to often give back and reciprocate. What the narcissist is often fixated on is I need, what can I get? What's in it for me because of this empty pit? And so they've got to do the work to close that off, the deep inner work, so that they're able to hold the love, reciprocate the love, so the relationship can get on healthy ground.
Yeah. And you know where I want to go from there, this is kind of a sidebar, but it
Mm,
also means the narcissist can still love you. The narcissist can still want to be with you, and the narcissist can still cheat as this desperate attempt to keep filling myself up, filling myself up. And it really has nothing to do with you as the betrayed partner. It has nothing to do with you.
that is so true. And that can also be so hard to hear because it's like, what are you talking about? That's my partner. I do take this personally. But again, we want to look at the bigger picture that if I've got an empty bottom in my whole body, I'm going to grab that affection, that approval from anywhere I can get it. And so if we're stuck in holding it as personal, that can be our limitation to be able to heal. So if you can see it from a broader perspective, that might be your ability to have a little more access to your own healing.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Or it chokes me up because it's so powerful. Because for me, that was the turning point when I realized I love the glass in the hole. My husband had a hole. That hole was not in my body. It was not in my psyche. It was not in my epigenetics.
Mhm.
Mine was something else. And I was filled with such compassion for him because I could see what a horrible existence that must feel like.
Mhm.
But that, just like you said, that's what allowed me to access my own healing. So I thank you for stating that because it's not about sacrificing ourselves because they had a horrible life.
That's right.
It's about that compassion, but then how do I fix me?
That's it. And it's interesting what you said earlier about we're not here to heal each other. It's almost in a way, we're here to bring up all that's unhealed. And then here it is out there on the table. And it's like, okay, sweetie, what are you going to do about your pile? And here's what I'm going to do about mine so that we can love each other in a healthier way, so that
Yeah.
we get to be each other's soft place to land in this wild and crazy world out there, that our love together can feel like a refuge instead of just another warring ground.
Yeah. And then this circles right back around to what we were talking about at the very beginning, nature or nurture. So, okay, we've put it all out on the table and we have figured out that your genetics are just messed up. How do I know, as the betrayed partner, if my partner can do it or not? Because there's the phrases out there, once a cheater, always a cheater. How do I trust? How do I know? How can I be safe when I can see their genetics are so bad? And they're telling me that they want to change, but how do I know?
Oh, yeah. Isn't that the $1 million question?
Yep.
I think in a situation like that, where we've hit that crisis point and we're trying to rebuild the trust and rebuild the relationship, the best thing that you can do, and this is a difficult thing to do, is to stay fully anchored in yourself. So, this is rebuilding your own confidence, your own broken heart, your own discernment, and being able to learn what it means to stay with yourself instead of giving yourself away for connection, instead of being over there in a way with him. What does he need? How does he feel? Is everything okay? Should I walk on eggshells? I dare not say that.
Hmm.
Versus, how can I really notice in my body Am I getting enough of what I need in this relationship? Because for the first 5 years or 10 years or however long this has been going on, I've been over there with him, trying
Yep.
to modulate his experience, trying to fix or not upset. And that's a dead end street. There's no way that we can have a long-term relationship if that's the way we're moving through it.
Yeah.
And so the real repair work is, how do I stay with myself when things feel unsettled in my relationship? How can I turn inward when all that comes up when I'm not sure that I can trust? Because that likely has its roots inside of you. What was it like not to trust a parent? What was it like to feel you had to walk on eggshells and you couldn't say what your true needs really are?
Yeah. Yeah.
Mhm.
And I love that flip because I mean, that's what I believe too. That's the work that I do. Unless we can be with ourselves, we we can tap dance all over the place and try to fix everybody else, but it doesn't work. We can truly only control ourselves. And I want to validate that it's hard. It's
Oh, yeah.
hard. Yeah, it's really hard. And it's hard to trust that I hope he can fix himself, but I can't do the work for him.
Yeah, that's it. That's it. And we also, I think, a really deeper part is, the reason I really hope he can fix himself is so this marriage can work out so that I won't end up alone. A lot of the times, our
Yes.
deepest fear is running the way we might compromise ourselves, the way we might not really look at that red flag, because we're just trying to keep everything okay. And so
Yeah.
that for me has been my deepest work after recovering from my broken relationship. How do I really face that fear of being alone? And where does that come from? And what does making my way in life feel like from my own decisions? So that really was the hugest healing movement around everything that happened after my betrayal.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
that's so I love because it's always there's always something deeper, always something
Yeah.
deeper, always something deeper. And it's interesting that you said that too, because last night my husband and I were having a conversation and he's been really sad lately. He's had some things come up at work, um, over Christmas, his mom, abusive, but no call, no text, no contact. And he's like, even though it keeps happening, even though I don't expect it, it still hurts. So we started talking about like feeling pain and how, as humans, we don't want to feel pain. We don't want to feel discomfort. We don't want to feel. And all of those ways, he's like, since Christmas on, I've been kind of deflecting that because I don't want to feel it. And he's like, last night, he said, the last thing I want to do is just sit down and cry or being depressed, but I need it. I need to just sit down and be really, really sad for a while because it's been a month now and I'm doing this dance of pushing away the pain. And it reminded me of what you were saying, like, this is that fear of being alone. Okay, how do we just sit with that fear too?
It sounds like he's really done a lot of his own work. There's a lot of wisdom in what he's shared. And I
Hmm.
think we're up against a lot in our culture. We have so many distractions. We've got one right in the palm of our hand, right? To not feel and to avoid. And yet, if you look at any of the somatic practices, if you look at any of how we really change and the science behind any of that, it really is meeting the emotion. So, as
Yeah.
scary as it might be to really sit with, that kind of deep, crushing pain and be able to have the tears, breathe through so that it can be metabolized
Yes.
instead of it being something. It's almost like when you try to sit on a beach ball in the pool with so much focus to keep that ball down. It's the same with these emotions.
Yeah.
And the truth is, that ball is going to flip up. There's going to be a moment where you can't quite keep it down.
Mm.
Same with emotions. And oftentimes we take it out in not such a kind way with the people closest to us. So
Hmm.
the healthiest thing we can do is turn towards the depth of those emotions to process them. So they're not kind of running us from behind.
Yeah. Yeah. And
Mhm.
I know some of those emotions that come up for a lot of people here, and I would just like to spend a couple seconds naming them. Why did I, why did I get in this situation? I knew things were stressful with my partner. Why did I keep walking on eggshells? Why did I keep trying to keep the peace? Why didn't I see this? Why am I having a hard time cutting and running right now when I know it's not going to be good? Why am I having a hard time? Like there's all of that. We talk about turning inward. We talk about doing our own work. But then sometimes when we turn inward, there's so much pain.
Absolutely. I hear that a lot in the clients that I work with, all of those really good examples. And
Hmm.
I think all that I can share is because it's familiar. So, can you be kind with yourself? Can you be tender with the heart that's been hurt? And you find yourself back in these patterns, and we don't notice them because we're in it. It's kind of like the forest for the trees. It's so darn familiar that we can't recognize, oops, here I go again, trying to be okay with what isn't, trying to make excuses for why am I being treated this way? And
Yeah.
so the why did I stay is because it was so damn familiar.
Yep.
And now we're in this crossroads where you're ready to see it differently, where you're ready to have fresh perspective and fresh eyes on it. So we want to be able to take that opportunity to make the change now
Yeah.
that there's not the willingness to stay in the familiar.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Let's talk about that tension because so many people, they're ready. I'm going to do this. And then you're right, it's hard. And people will say, I just want to go back to normal. And what I always talk about it's like pretend normal. We've all
Yeah.
seen what's going on. Pretend normal doesn't help. How does that look in practice, in reality, in therapy? Because it's not like we make a decision and we move forward. There's that vacillation. How
Mhm.
does that look? What's normal? What can listeners expect once they make that decision?
Mm. Wow. That what's coming up for me is a book I'm reading right now called The Myth of Normal. I think we're such in a world is again like this, put the smile on in the picture, and yet you're hiding so much pain and despair. And so I think normal is going to look different for each and every person. It's like a spectrum. And the willingness to say, maybe things are going to feel a bit messy. Maybe things feel a bit wobbly until I find my new center because I've been in such a place where I have felt confused or unsure or trying to make okay what isn't, that really right now, what I want to be with is the clarity to really meet what is happening and what is going on here in reality instead of trying to make it okay, trying to make excuses for. And so maybe what it is radical honesty.
Yeah.
What it is just feeling what is here moment to moment instead of hoping that there could be a plan because I think we just want to know when will the pain end. Okay, are we talking 3 weeks? Are we talking 3 years? And it'll be a little bit different for each person walking this path.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's a great book, by the way. Definitely,
Mhm.
definitely a highly recommend. Um, okay, so we're gonna play like this little game because I wrote down trying to make okay what isn't. You're big on inherited family trauma. I talk a lot about ancestral healing. Trying to make okay what isn't. That's my inherited trauma.
Mhm.
I come from a long line of women who tried to make everything okay that wasn't. Whether it was, my dad being drafted and going to Vietnam, whether it was my, grandmother's husband, same thing in World War II, whether it was my great grandmother going through the Depression and losing her son, and there's having an alcoholic husband. I mean, there's this long line of women not just in my family, because I think that's kind of like the historical role of women. Think Little House on the Prairie. How do we make magic out of nothing at all? How do I, you know what I mean, spread love? That's my inherited family trauma is trying to make okay what isn't. It's interesting because my partner's trauma they destroy things. In his family, he would always say, my family scorches the earth. So what a perfect fit. They're
Mhm.
scorchers, and I'm making okay what isn't. He scorches, I make okay what isn't. He scorches. So when you talk about patterns and systems meeting each other, that was just a perfect example.
Mhm.
So we have, boom, the explosion of infidelity. I start becoming aware. He starts becoming aware. When we're both in our higher mind, it can go great. And yet, still, 7 years later, there can be times where a pattern comes in, and I'm like, dang, I just reacted the same way I would have reacted 10 years ago. And that's not okay. Earlier, this is a compound complex question, sorry. Earlier, we talked about owning our own recovery and not constantly reminding each other. And yet, still in partnerships, we support each other. So, can you talk about where is that bound between, honey, it looks like you might have slipped into one of our previous patterns
Mhm.
and doing each other's work?
Mm, yes. It's almost as like you said earlier, imprint meets imprint, and that is what it is, even
Hmm.
though we are improving and healing and doing our work. There can be moments in that reactionary place where exactly what you said, here I am back 10 years ago. How did that happen?
Yeah.
Because there's such love and there's such meaning to whatever's happening in the moment that we can get sucked under. And so I think the best thing that we can do in any of our experiences, when we know better, we do better. So the fact that you even notice that, there's the ability to correct and continue, which is wow. I just feel like I regressed a decade. What you said really pulled me under. And I think our deeper work in that moment is, how can I get a hold of what I made that mean in an instant? Where did I go all the way back? And how can I work with what I made that mean? Because we're really trying to understand what's happening for us in the moment, what's underneath our reaction. I think every time we step out of ourselves and over into what we hope our partner would do, we know we're a little bit off track.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I love
Mhm.
that. Great. Fabulous answer. Fabulous answer. So we've talked a lot about the relationship and the work between the partners, but it extends to more than that. It's extended family, it's friends. So how does this shift ripple out as you're becoming more aware, as either the relationship is healing or it's dissolving? How does this ripple back? How do you then approach your parents, your family of origin? How do you sit with your siblings who are not yet aware of this? How does that change look?
Oof, that can be a bit of a hard path. And I think the biggest and most important thing to remember, I think a lot of the times we talk about boundary work, and there's this idea that, well, I have my boundary, but geez, my mom never honors it, or, my sister walks right over it. And so the remembrance that a boundary is not about it. Can we press pause for a sec?
Yeah.
The dog is scratching at the
Oh,
door.
nope, that's fine.
So that can be a tough one, Laura. That can really be a practice that you need to come in ready and equipped when you go back to visit family. And so there's a lot of talk about boundaries, and sometimes there are certain people who walk right over that boundary that you're trying to hold. And so I think it can be really important to recognize that a boundary is never about the other person.
Yep.
So the boundary is about keeping you in when your mom says what she does, or your sister, responds in a way that feels critical, or gets you off center. And
Mhm.
so this capacity to really be in your body, be in yourself, so that when that thing comes up, when that trigger, when maybe you're misunderstood, you can respond from a place where it's okay if you don't understand my choices. I understand my choices. And
Yeah.
that's an so that you're not in defense of what you're doing. You're simply not needing to explain yourself to anyone.
Yeah.
You understand your choices. And so I think this also goes back to not bringing your learnings to your mom, to your family, to, extended family, to, because I think we do that. Come on, come with me. It's easier this way.
Yes.
Join me over here. And we have to accept that everybody's on their own path and doing what they think is right.
Yeah. Yeah. Two prongs that I want to go. First prong is that leads to what you were talking about earlier, which is the fear of rejection. Really, what's underneath that?
Yeah.
I'm afraid my family's going to reject me. My siblings are going to be rejecting me. So I think that's the first thing. The second thing I wanted to say is you used the phrase in body and staying in your body. I do a lot of somatic work. You do a lot of somatic work. Sometimes I think people don't really know what that means. What do you mean
Mm.
in your body, Johanna? What do you mean, Laura? I'm in my body. I live in my body. Let's talk about that a little bit more. What does it mean to stay present with yourself? What does it mean to be embodied? What what is that? I'm in my body. Of course I'm in my body.
Well, we are all physically in our body, but before I really found this work, I would say I was more of a walking head. Everything was mental, and I didn't really have a connection. If someone would say, "How are you feeling right now?" I would have to think,
Fine.
"Oh, I'm feeling tense and kind of nervous. I'm feeling uptight." But I wasn't able to access where in my body that lived. And so, a big part of my own sort of journey of coming home to myself, of really making decisions from inside of me versus what my family might want or what other people or what society might expect, was to really follow this somatic journey and taking different courses and working with different practitioners. But the idea is really locating, okay, in conflict with my spouse, when I feel jealous or untrustworthy, or these feelings that kind of take me off track and have me more in my reactive zone,
Hmm.
what's happening inside of my body. And so sometimes that just means slowing down enough. Really, we want to quiet the mind to find the sensation. So I often will tell my clients, can you be a sensation scientist? Can you find where maybe your belly feels tight or your heart just drops? Or I will set up internal visualizations where I might say, okay, close your eyes, and your ex or the person you want to get back together with is stepping close. What's happening in your body? Oh, my heart is racing. My mouth feels dry. And so we start to recognize we all have access to the body. It's just the mind is louder. So we want to turn the mind down from 100 to maybe 10 and
Yeah.
turn the body up, give the body a chance to speak to us, because the body never lies. The mind can get easily confused, but the body is clearer and will always be a trusted guide for you.
Yeah. Yeah, it is. There's so much. I'm struggling with the word. So I'm pausing because I'm like, what is actually the word? Kind of disbelief in a way. We have just been conditioned away from that. But the
Mm.
body doesn't lie. It just doesn't. And for anybody who's listening and is thinking, yeah, whatever, that sounds like woo woo, whatever. Sure, sure, sure. I can think through this. I can think through this. We can't just change your mind in 1 second. I know that. But I feel like my ask is just for a moment in your next stressful moment, in your next argument, just try it and to see what kind of information you get because it is shocking. To
Yes,
me, it's shocking.
absolutely. I think that's a great invitation to just try it. We
Yeah,
are so guided to let the mind lead. And I think one way to look at it is the mind has got you this far. And if
yeah,
you're not liking where you're at, it's time to try something different.
yeah. I really love that. I really love that. Moving back into some of the inherited stuff. We've talked about epigenetics, we've talked about nature, nurture, but I want to say more or hear you say more about this inherited trauma. If my great grandparents were in the Holocaust, you're telling me that trauma can impact me. If my mother was sexually abused, you're telling me that can impact me. Say some more about inherited family trauma.
Yes, absolutely. To a lot of people, it sounds like, what on earth are you talking about? How could that be? And so some of your listeners might want to look up one of my favorite researchers. Her name is Rachel Yehuda out Mount Sinai University. And her parents were Holocaust survivors. She's a descendant of the Holocaust. And so she had a special reason to really look into what are the brain changes, what happens. And what she discovered is we are born prepared to deal with the stress of a previous generation. So I like to think of it as the innate intelligence of this miraculous body we all live in, that we're born prepared, almost as if the gift from our grandparents and our parents could say, just so the rug's not pulled out from under you, just so
Mhm.
you're prepared, here's the information cellularly at the very level of the DNA in the body. Where this comes into trouble is, let's say we're living in, I don't know, beautiful Connecticut and everything's abundant and available, but we're living with the hypervigilance of the grandmother that went through depression. I can't tell you how many clients I've worked with, Laura, that have a full basement full of just in case food,
Yeah.
deep freezers full of the just in case something happens. And every single time when I take their 3 generation genealogram, we have got stories of war. We have got stories of depression. So that there's this panic in a way, like an alarm button that's been pushed in their body, and they're making decisions from that place. And so this can be the how we resolve longstanding anxiety, how we really resolve this pulse in the body that keeps us stressed and on and hypervigilant. And the root of it is combing through this family tree to find out, what am I carrying that's not mine?
Yeah.
I mean, my most influential teacher wrote a book called It Didn't Start With You. And here
Love
I am
that book.
living, yeah, here I am living in Mexico, and it translates to, this pain is not mine. I thought, how perfect is that? And a lot of us think, well, this is just me. I just get anxious around crowds, or this is just me. This is how love go. My partners always leave me. I can't trust them. And my deeper question is, and where do you think that comes from? Would you like to be free of that set point? And that's what epigenetics helps to unravel and show us.
Hmm. And I really appreciate that you asked, posed that question. Would you like to be free of this set point? Because if the
Mhm.
answer is no, you don't have to change. You don't have to do the work. If this is working for you and you don't want to, or if you don't want to now,
That's right.
that's
That's
okay.
right.
Yeah. But when you're
Timing is everything, as they say.
yes. But yeah, when you're ready, you can change it. It's not just, yeah, well, it's the way I was raised. It's the way
That's
I
it.
believe.
That's it. And I think it's human nature. I know for me it was that the pain had to get so great. It's almost like it squeezed me into looking at something that maybe I wouldn't have looked at before when life was just rolling along.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mhm.
That's why I often say infidelity, betrayal is such a huge gift.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, in the moment, it does not feel like a gift, but what it caused me to look at, who it helped me become, would not have happened because I'm just not going to dismantle my life because I feel like it and I want to get better. But as long as it's
Exactly.
dismantled,
Yeah.
yeah, let's do
Oh, it
something
was my
about
greatest growth curve. I mean, it
it.
was
Yes.
painful as anything, but it was the time I grew the most and got to know myself the best in my entire life so far.
Yeah,
Mhm.
absolutely. Absolutely. So then moving this forward, talking about inherited patterns and nature versus nurture, so many listeners have kids. And sometimes we go, oh gosh, I messed that up. Or, oh, how do I break this pattern going forward? And does my healing today impact generations in the future?
Oh, yes, that's the wonderful news. And so that's the best gift we can give our children, is to come to completion with whatever the pain was that lives in the family system. So I'll work with some clients where they're estranged from their mom, and often for a very good reason.
Yeah.
It's not about seeing her every Sunday for a family dinner. It's about changing the way you hold her inside. And some of my clients, their parents have long since passed away, but they're still resentful and angry and hurt. And so the work we do is within ourselves that protects our children. So if I can really feel, when Mother's Day comes around, or if somebody mentions how amazing their father is and I don't feel that way about my own,
Yeah.
if I can settle that within myself, this is what protects it from going on to the next generation. If you can imagine it like a series of dominoes,
Yeah.
you're the domino that says, nope, I'm
Boop.
coming out of that, so that the next domino doesn't impact our children and our grandchildren. And so it's incredible, this work and its ability to impact what we pass on to our kids.
Yeah. And I wrote that down too. Changing the way we hold them inside. You can still
Mhm.
have the boundary. You still do not need to be with your abusive parent, but you can just shift that inside.
That's it. And I think sometimes it's almost like one of my favorite ways of working with clients is to come to this place of, how could it have been any other way? So if I look
Mhm.
at my mother and her, I don't know, addicted mother and her father that left when she was 3, how could I expect my mom to be any other way? When
Yes.
we take a look at our parents' generation, therapy was not really accessible
No, it
or
wasn't.
something that people felt good about reaching out for. We're so lucky in the generation we live in. I mean, psychology today is on every waiting room table where
Yes.
we can speak about it openly and there's not the stigma, thank goodness.
Yeah.
And so we're doing the work that they couldn't.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mhm.
And you're right. There's podcasts. We can listen to podcasts in the
Yeah,
privacy of our oh no, nobody needs to know we're doing online therapy. Like there's
that's right.
yeah. And I appreciate that question because again, in my infidelity healing story, and I challenge all listeners for this too, when I look at my husband's past, of course this happened. Of course this happened. This was like the best scenario of all the things that could have happened, considering what he went through. How could he have done any other way? And then on my side, too, of course, I overfunctioned. Of course, I wanted to be the shining light and to make everything good, even when it wasn't good. Even when it was good, I could see how I would spin it to make it not look good so I could make it good. Like all of those layers. Of course, I did that. Of course, he did that. So I really love that question. And I do challenge all of you listeners as we're closing out this show to ponder that today. How could it have been any other way? And maybe like me, you'll also have that realization that this is actually the best scenario. It coulda, woulda, shoulda been a lot worse.
Mhm. Absolutely. Very well said. I
Yeah.
think it creates for me, as you say that, like a settling in my body. And
Yeah.
now I can look at it with fresh eyes.
Yeah. Yeah. At one point, I remember telling my husband, I think you should be in prison or dead.
Mm,
Based on what you went through, you shouldn't be here. And you're right. I like how you said the settling in the body and brought it back to that somatic piece because
mm.
it's not just intellectualizing it. It's, oh, we're all so blessed. We're all so lucky. This feels really right. So thank you for bringing it back to the body.
Mhm.
So before we head out, where can people learn more about you and your work, and just epigenetics and this whole concept of nature, nurture, trauma, all of that?
Yeah, I love to write about this topic. So there's all kinds of articles on my website, which is www.johannalynn.ca. I'm on LinkedIn and Facebook under my name, Johanna Lynn. And so yeah, you can find me there and read more about all that I'm doing.
Yeah. And she has great stuff, and I will definitely put the links. We've known each other for several years. You've been on my
Mm,
podcast before. I will also put the link to our previous podcast in
wonderful.
the show notes here. So if people are like, I need more, you can get more. If this is new to you, listeners, and you're still thinking, I don't exactly know, I just encourage you to lean into it a little bit more. And if you're like, yeah, I'm still working with this, keep working with it. Keep working with it. If not for you, for your ancestors. If not for you and your ancestors, for your children. Be that domino, pull it out, make the changes. Because bottom line, it just feels better to be happy. It just
That's
feels
right.
better to be free.
That is so well said.
Yeah, yeah. So thank you so much for your time and for your wisdom.
Thanks for having me, Laura. It's always great to be in conversation with you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Listeners, have an amazing week. And as usual, always remember to flaunt exactly who you are because who you are is always more than enough.